Let's pray. Dear God, thank you for this day to come together to study this lesson. Help us to learn from it and apply it to our challenges and needs today. Be with the people who have suffered because of the storms and hurricanes. Be with us as we continue to deal with the pandemic. Be with our nation and the world. Be with those mentioned here in the prayer requests. In Christ's name we pray. Amen. All right. Well, I'll do a quick update. COVID still activity is fairly low. Death rates are not gone. They're still fairly low. Still about 400 a week in the country. Somewhere in that between 400 and 500. Now, how many of y'all have heard? I've heard this a lot. Patients come and tell us, well, nobody dies from the flu anymore. Anybody heard that during the pandemic? Anybody heard that? And it's even on the news sometimes. Nobody dies from the flu anymore. So I thought I'd check that out. From October of 2021 to June of 2022, that gets your flu season, and plus a little bit probably. In the this is just in the United States. Hospitalizations from the flu were about, well, let's see, about 82,000 to 170,000 in the United States. Cases of the flu were between, and they do between because not all cases of flu ever get reported, no matter what year you're doing. Because some people stay at home and have the flu. Right. Or they go somewhere, they'll get tested, but so it's always estimated 8 million to 13 million cases during that time frame of the flu. Wow. Deaths between 5,000 to 14,000. 5,000, 14,000. Wow. So nobody dies from the flu, right? Nobody gets the flu anymore, right? 8 million to 13 million people in the United States got the flu last year. And we have flu shots. We've had them for a long time to try to protect people from dying and going to the hospital as much as you can. So when you hear that reported, people are just popping off and don't know what they're talking about. I have people come and say, well, nobody gets the flu anymore. I said, I like it. What do you mean nobody gets the flu anymore?
If you need the new COVID test, and you need the flu shot, how long do you have to wait between, and which one should you do first?
You do not have to wait. Now, I had my 5th COVID shot. Let's see. What day did I have that? Actually, it was Wednesday, a week ago. I mean, from this past Wednesday, so it's been almost 10 days now. I'm planning to get my flu shot tomorrow.
Okay.
I like to get my flu shot in October.
Do you have them?
I do. I do. We have the flu shots in our office. Okay. We don't have the COVID vaccines. I had to go to Walgreens. So.
I was in the same kind you have been getting.
I did. I have done okay with Pfizer, so I got the Pfizer new booster. It's interesting. Vicki got the Walgreens. We both went to Walgreens. Vicki went to Walgreens and laid down and got the Moderna, which she's always got. And while she was there, she got planned where I could go up to the Walgreens on 155 North, and I got my Pfizer booster there. So, and the only problem I had, I had a little bit of a alarm. It's probably the least alarm I've had. I did not feel sick at all.
I was the same way.
Yeah.
Arm didn't even get sick.
Vicky's arm whelped up from the Moderna. She got a pretty good whelp, so, but she felt fine. So the last time she got a booster, she felt terrible. But this booster is a little different. They've reduced the dose of the other things in it. You're just boosting those now, even at a less rate than you were previously. So you do the booster, and then you get the Omicron protection. So I've had 5 of those. So.
If you, from your experience, look for COVID to have a couple of peaks around the holidays?
It could do like the flu. It could eventually get like the flu where it had peaks. So I don't think it's going to go away completely, but it does. Fortunately, it seems like, let's hope it continues this trend where the last one, although it was very highly contagious, was not too severe with a few exceptions. There's still people dying. So. But anyway, still the message there is what I elected to do was to separate my COVID vaccine and my flu shot by about 2 weeks. just because if you have side effects, I won't know what I want to know which one I have side effects.
Yeah,
And if I have a sore arm, I only want one at a time.
right. Okay, thanks. I
Adam
appreciate
got
that.
his Adam got his flu shot, and then like 2 or 3 days later got his COVID vaccine in the same arm. He said, my arm was still sore, and that's really sore. I said, why are you talking about the arm? I said, well, this guy had already written down left arm. So he couldn't redo it. But anyway. But you just want to be as protected as you can. I don't know about y'all. Everybody's tired of wearing masks, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Although some people got used to it. Some people haven't done bother at all. When you wear it most of the day, it gets kind of tiring. So. But anyway. So, all right. So next time anybody asks you, since nobody dies from flu anymore, what are you going to tell them?
Sorry. you're wrong.
Sorry. The stats would say otherwise. Plenty of people died last year. It was not a bad flu outbreak. So 5,000 to 14,000 deaths in a not bad flu outbreak. So it tells you if you had a bad flu outbreak, you're gonna have a lot more. So, all right. Let's get now to our lesson. Our lesson was fairly short. I thought we'd be better. I think we're only in Exodus this week, and then we move on. Next week is Deuteronomy, then Judges and Samuel. So I thought we would just do the whole Exodus 1 and 2 rather than just grab a few verses out of chapter 2 and 1. So. Now, anybody know who wrote the book of Exodus? Don't feel bad. Nobody knows who wrote the book of Exodus.
Oh, good.
Some editors put it together. Does anybody know about when it was written? Let's give you some time frames. Abraham was somewhere around this. Moses was somewhere around 12 to 1300 in the times he lived. David was here. Exile started about here, give or take a year or two, ended about right here. Jesus was born about what? Actually, he was born before. Some people say as early as -4 or 4 BC. 4 BC, I guess you'd say. You want to do it that way? 4 BC, 4 before Christ. Christ was born. Anyway, he was born when it changed somewhere in there, down around 30 AD. In case you've forgotten, some people do. We ask this question at Miles a lot. It is now 2022. So, of course, you get asked and missed sometimes. So when do you think the Exodus book, when did it take place? When did the story that we read about Exodus take place? I'll give you a big clue.
When Moses was a baby.
Yeah, so Moses, yeah. So you're in this time frame. When was it written? Down. Actually, it's probably written somewhere in this neighborhood. You can see how long it is between, but there's a reason for that. We're looking at the story of Israel, an oppressed nation saved by God. These people right here are being oppressed and they need God to save them again. So it's very important now to write down the stories to encourage them that God has been able to do this before. So that's why it became more important to get all this written down during this time frame. Now, where they got the information by oral traditions, and there probably was written down stuff to look through too. But they compiled and edited these works. In fact, most people think Exodus was probably written before Genesis. But once you write down the story of Exodus, you need Genesis to start telling you how we got to where we are in Exodus. What character does the book of Genesis end with? What key character?
Joseph.
Yes. And he's actually mentioned in Exodus, but he's been gone a long time. So, and Joseph was a key character for the people of Israel, where God helped them through Joseph being there at the time when they were there to get food. And Joseph helped them out. And God provided Joseph. Now we're going to look at God provided Moses. Call Moses to do the same thing. And then this is one of the things we need to look at whenever you look at the Old Testament. I think one of the things my commentary made a great point of is that this is really a story that never dies. This is a story for all people who are oppressed, looking for somebody that God will use to help them out of their oppression. What's one of the most things that the people of Israel went through, or people of Israel, Jewish people went through, and not in my time frame, right before my time frame, who were they oppressed by?
When the kings changed.
How about I'm talking about Hitler.
Oh, in our time.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
And the other countries came to the rescue to help them, but not before millions of them were killed by Hitler. So they were being oppressed by Hitler because of hate, just pure hate of a group of people.
The Jews left in Russia today are being oppressed.
Well, one of the most oppressive regimes is probably Putin. He oppresses his own people,
Yeah, that's what I meant.
and he's going to oppress the people of Ukraine. So this kind of character still lives. These are your modern day pharaohs. Okay? In Exodus is the Pharaoh. What was the Pharaoh in Egypt? A powerful, rich dictator. And the people were to serve him and his needs and his family needs, right? I mean, and now Putin's over in communist Russia, and we all know that in communism, everybody shares everything, right? So Putin's basically living, he's just barely, cut out a decent living, right? No, he's filthy rich, right? He's probably one of the most wealthy men in the world. If you knew exactly everything he owned. Much like a pharaoh. Much like a pharaoh. So
Everybody shared equally in the misery.
that's right. That's right. So, and some of the critiques of our American way of going to capitalism is sometimes that it serves it, while it serves all the people to some extent, it still serves the rich people the best. That's one of the criticisms of it that you'll hear. And there are times when that's sort of true, although everybody, I mean, there are people here that probably remember the Depression. It felt like everybody was poor. Not everybody was poor, but a whole lot of people were. So now, in our day and time in America, what person led some oppressed people and seemed to be doing God's calling during our time frame, even my time frame?
Billy Graham.
What oppressed people did he lead?
Martin Luther King.
Martin Luther King.
Okay.
Martin Luther King, because some folks don't like to admit it, but Black people in America were oppressed. I still remember, y'all probably remember. I remember as a kid going to the doctor, and it was another waiting room on the other side of the building.
Movie theaters, restaurants.
I remember going to Jekyll Island, and I was swimming in a swimming pool. And all of a sudden, my mom and dad said, "We've got to leave now." And I thought, why have we got to leave? We had been here about 20 minutes. I didn't know a Black man jumped in the pool. That was in the 60s. So and you know what? I remember him saying something about he may not get there with you to the promised land, just like Moses. And he really didn't. He didn't, but he at least, I'm not gonna sit here and say this man was a perfect man, because I haven't known any perfect man. I've read about one, but I've never known a perfect man. Moses was far from a perfect man. Moses didn't even want to do what God wanted him to do according to the Bible. God had to talk him into it. So,
But I think Martin Luther King really, he he might have done some things that he had to ask forgiveness for,
Right.
but his overall concept was Christ-like. He wanted to truly help the people,
Right.
and he wanted them to be people of character. He
Right.
wanted them to rise, their character to rise to what he thought they deserved. That's my thinking.
Right. Well, yes, and it's hard, I have a hard time knowing exactly if all the bad things said about him were even true, because so many people were denigrating him, trying to keep people oppressed by keeping this leader oppressed, that you don't even know if everything they said that he did was true or created, fabricated. Do we know any politicians that fabricate things about other politicians today?
How long you got?
So, in fact, a lot of some political parties now purposefully, in talking to young politicians coming along, try to get them to denigrate the other party, to make them look bad, to serve their own purposes. So the powerful can be more powerful. So, but let's look at, so the point of all of this that I'm saying is this story of Israel also is a story of all oppressed people. And the problem is sometimes you can be oppressed and not even realize that you're being oppressed, because you're told you're not. You're told you're okay, but you could be being oppressed. Freedom is precarious. All right, so let's look at Exodus 1 and 2. These are the names of the sons of Israel. Now, who was, when you say the sons of Israel, who we talking? Jacob. Jacob, yeah, and it tells you that in just a second. Who went to Egypt with Jacob, each with his family: Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, Benjamin, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, and Asher. Who did they not name?
Joseph.
Joseph. They didn't name Joseph. It says the descendants of Jacob numbered 70 in all. Joseph was already in Egypt. So they're saying that Joseph deserves to be mentioned by himself. He stands out compared to those other names. So it says, now Joseph and all his brothers and all that generation died. That's one thing that let's see. He's dead. All of them are dead. He's dead. One thing you can guarantee, right? No matter how powerful you are, I know there are a few people that are frozen somewhere thinking they're going to be thawed out. If they do thaw them out, they'll still die. So anyway, so all that generation died, but the Israelites were fruitful and multiplied greatly and became exceedingly numerous, so that the land was filled with them. So, well, one of the things I can tell you about back then, there was no birth control, other than abstinence, which they apparently did not practice. They were fruitful and multiplied. But the bottom line is, they were there. We're talking from here to here is probably several hundred years. It seems like you talk about Joseph died and then here comes Moses. It's several hundred years. These people have been over there a long time. You may be in captivity. So, I mean, there are people that just lived and died in Egypt as slaves.
They didn't know anything else.
Right. They don't know that God ever rescued them. They don't know that Moses ever came along. They were born a slave, died a slave. So, all right. The land was filled with them. Then a new king, they don't call him a Pharaoh yet, but they call him a king. The Pharaoh's a king, so, who did not know about Joseph, came to power in Egypt. Look, he said to the people, the Israelites have become much too numerous for us. Do we ever have people now that are afraid that a certain group of people is going to get too numerous around us? Do people move because people get too numerous around us?
I think so.
Yeah, they do. I mean, I'm talking about human nature.
Yeah.
One of the biggest concerns about immigration is that people, different type of people who've been oppressed in a different place are going to come here and impact our way of life. They're going to get too numerous. There's, y'all, I call it a conspiracy theory. Replacement therapy, anybody heard of that? Yeah. So I call that a conspiracy theory.
Yes.
People that live will die and be replaced by other people who are alive. And colors may come and colors may go. Sometimes one's more in one area, one's more in another area. They're all God's people. So, none of us had a choice to be a man or a woman or a, well, now they say you can have your choice when but as to what we were born and what color we were.
Next week you
we
have
had
a
no
baby.
choice. I had no choice to be born. Nobody asked me, would you like to be born in Georgia? I would have said I never heard of it. None of us have those choices. So the thing we all want to work toward as followers of Christ is to make this a better world for everybody. So, and not just for ourselves. All right. Anyway, this king didn't know about it. They're getting too numerous. He says, look at these people. The Israelites have become too numerous for us. Come, we must deal shrewdly with them, or they will become even more numerous. And if war breaks out, they'll join our enemies and fight against us and leave the country. So they're afraid, number one, they'll lose their labor. This is their labor force.
Mm-hmm.
So they put slave masters over them to oppress them with forced labor. And they built Pithom and Ramses as store cities for Pharaoh. So that Pharaoh had a way of saving food, but he didn't do it for all the people. He did mainly make sure he was okay. But the more they were oppressed, the more they multiplied and spread. So the Egyptians came to dread the Israelites and worked them ruthlessly. They made their lives bitter with hard labor in brick and mortar, and with all kinds of work in the fields. And in all their hard labor, the Egyptians used them ruthlessly. The king of Egypt said to the Hebrew midwives, those names were Sapphira and I guess that's Puah, P-U-A-H. Interesting, their name. So often women don't get named in the Bible, you know. Some woman did something somewhere, you know, but these are named. They were midwives. It says, when you help the Hebrew women in childbirth, so this is the king talking to them. When you help the Hebrew women in childbirth and observe them on the delivery stool, if it is a boy, kill him. That's pretty ruthless, isn't it? But if it is a girl, let her live. They're not afraid of the girls. Girls don't tend to fight. And if girls can't multiply, they don't have any boys around, right? Can't have more of them. So that's his population control plan. And that's how to stay in power. People in power, they want to stay in power, always figure out some kind of system to do something to somebody to make so that they can stay in power. So it says, when you help them to kill them, now that would go against what somebody would want to do. Midwives, they're there at a time to bring a child into the world, not to kill them. The midwives, however, feared God. They feared God more than they did the Pharaoh. We got too many people nowadays that fear some other person other than God. The midwives, however, feared God and did not do what the king of Egypt had told them. They let the boys live. Then the king of Egypt summoned the midwives and asked them, why have you done this? Why have you let the boys live? The midwives answered Pharaoh, Hebrew women are not like Egyptian women. They are vigorous and give birth before the midwives arrive. Well, I suspect most women give childbirth about the same, no matter where they're from. It's pretty tough. Maybe just say they're tougher. The point of the matter, they had to give him a reason why this happened, right? I wonder if he believed them. Now, the other thing we have to realize, remember how long later these stories are being told. you got to also think, what's the point of the story we're being told? Not get lost in all the little details. The point is going to tell us how God intervenes in Israel's history and how he utilizes Moses. So we're leading up to Moses and how Moses was, the story of Moses' birth. So the midwives answered, and Hebrew women are not like Egyptian women. They are vigorous and give birth before the midwives rise. So God was kind to the midwives, and the people increased and became more numerous. And because the midwives feared God, he gave them families of their own. Then Pharaoh gave this order to all his people. Every boy that is born you must throw into the Nile, but let every girl live. Now that's an interesting order because he didn't exclude anybody. He's going to kill all the boys that are Egyptian. I don't think he's talking about that. Do y'all read it any different? He says, give an order. Every boy that is born you must throw into the Nile, but let every girl live. You'd think that'd be talking about Hebrews. Now, Hebrews, when they're talking about Hebrews here, that's a very, for them, that was a very generic term. Basically, a Hebrew was any nomad from the Middle Eastern region who was living as a foreigner in Egypt. They were all Hebrews. Not necessarily the people of Israel, just Hebrews. The people of Israel will become a subset of these Hebrews that were over there, okay? So, but just mostly, if you were a foreigner, you were a Hebrew. So, and all of this basically leads us up to chapter 2, and that's the birth of Moses. It says, now a man of the house of Levi married a Levite woman. So two people out of the tribe of Levi were married. The names right now remain anonymous. And she became pregnant, gave birth to a son. When she saw that he was a fine child. What's a fine child?
Perfect in every way. Healthy.
My son.
Well,
Mine says beautiful.
okay. Beautiful, okay. What version is that?
Beautiful, beautiful. What were you watching?
I don't even know.
It's a big one.
It's been very, very well read.
Yeah.
Coleman, Kristen.
Okay. It's still probably going to be either Revised Standard or King. Is it King James?
No.
It's not. Okay. Okay. It's easier to read. Okay. All right. So anyway, a fine child. Now, what this is reminiscent of, if you look at who's telling these stories, and remember, they're also going to write down the creation stories. When God created the earth, he created something different. You can't say it. When he created the earth, he said that it was good. When Moses' mother has him born, she looks at him and says, this is a good child, a fine child. In him I am well pleased. You know, she's happy about this birth. He's a fine child. So she hid him for 3 months. But when she could hide him no longer, maybe because he was getting older, a little noisier, a little bigger. When she could hide him no longer, she got a papyrus basket for him and coated it with tar and pitch. Anybody got another word other than tar?
Slime.
Slime. Anybody got another word? Bitumen. Anybody got that? All the same kind of stuff.
But they did use tar.
Yeah.
It was,
And bitumen, I think, is another word for tar, basically. Isn't it? Bitumen. One version says bitumen and pitch.
They used to use bitumen on roofs,
Yeah.
the seal roof.
So anyway, she sealed the basket so it could float, basically. The papyrus basket. Then she placed the child in it and put it among the reeds along the bank of the Nile. Now, when you first read this, unless you finish reading the story, you're like, no, wait a minute. Let's say I go down to the Chattahoochee River and I put a baby in there in a basket and just float it down the river. What do you think the chances of that baby surviving are?
Not good.
Unless somebody rescues it, right?
Yeah.
Now, I think of the Nile River. What do you think of when you think about the Nile River?
Big.
Huh?
Cleopatra.
I think my crocodile.
Oh.
Oh,
I was
this
thinking
would be a little hors
mosquitoes,
d'oeuvres.
you know, down around the water, it would just be full of mosquitoes.
Yeah, I think about crocodile.
Yeah, I think
Like I said,
crocodiles
this
would
would
be
be
a
hors d'oeuvres.
more imminent danger than mosquitoes.
Yeah.
Is
I think about
it
crocodile.
not marsh?
Yeah, there's marsh in
Would it be
there.
marsh?
Sit among the reeds.
Yeah,
And that's the Nile, is marshy, because that's where they get their water. You
yeah.
know, and that's one reason they congregate around the Nile, because everything else is desert around there, so you gotta get where there's water. Humans tend to hang around water,
That's right.
to their own detriment, some when a hurricane comes, but humans like to hang around water. So anyway, she put him there, and there's a lot you could say, well, she knew that somebody would come along. She knew that somebody was gonna be bathing there. We're not told that. We surmise that. She placed the child in it, put him along, and then in the reeds along the bank. His sister. So it's interesting. We said now a man of the house of Levi married a Levite woman, and then she became pregnant. Well, it looks like she'd already been pregnant, doesn't it? Because Moses has a sister. His sister stood in a distance to see what would happen to her. Now the thing of it is, I guess I got an eyelash. Not feeling too good. Okay. Sisters don't take on the same importance. It's like that, like Moses was the first child. Must have been the firstborn son in that family. But anyway, his sister stood at a distance to see what would happen to him. Now, if you look at this story, Moses is just floating along. He's just a little baby. The key characters in this story are all women. If you think about it, it's all women. Because then the Pharaoh's daughter went down to the Nile to bathe, and her attendants were walking along the riverbank. So her attendants go with her. She's not going to go down to the river by herself. Pharaoh's daughter will need to be protected, probably from people being mad at the Pharaoh about something, or the slaves, or maybe crocodiles. That's another thing I thought about. But anyway, she doesn't go anywhere by herself. She's royalty. So she went down to the Nile to bathe, and her attendants were walking along the riverbank. She saw a basket among the reeds and sent her slave girl. So she has a slave girl with her among her attendants. She sent her slave girl to get it. She opened it and saw the baby. He was crying, and she felt sorry for him. And then she said, "This is one of the Hebrew babies, not one of the Israelites. It's one of the Hebrew babies." She recognized it was not an Egyptian baby. Then his sister asked Pharaoh's daughter. Now, remember, she stood a distance to see what would happen. I wonder in this story, how did the sister get past the attendants?
Don't you think that maybe everybody knew that the Pharaoh's daughter went to that same place to bathe? And so
Right.
that's why the baby was put there.
Right.
So the Pharaoh's daughter would find her, find him.
Yes. Now, one of the things we have to remember, the story about Moses and his birth being told over and over again. The facts are very hard to know for sure, but this many years after. But the point is that he was saved in this situation. His sister asked the Pharaoh's daughter, "Shall I go and get one of the Hebrew women to nurse the baby for you?" So it's interesting. The sister was very opportunistic, wasn't she? I still wonder how you get by all those attendants.
She might have been there first.
Maybe so. I don't know. Well, she said she stood at a distance to see what would happen. She was ready. I mean, I'm getting caught up in the detail. I'm always curious as how this thing happened. I'm like, but these things happen quick in these stories. I mean, we're not told this. You could tell a story about this for like 10 pages to really get all the details.
Women were pretty much ignored back then.
Well, I mean,
So maybe they just passed her by.
I wonder if her attendants were women also, though. Because they probably want male attendants going down there watching bathe.
Right.
Pharaoh, we done killed them. So then his sister asked Pharaoh's daughter, "Shall I go get one of the Hebrew women?" "Yes, go," she answered, because the Pharaoh's daughter would not be allowed to raise a baby, somebody else's baby. Not, that's above their standing. They would have people to do it for them. Even their own baby would be raised by somebody for them, probably. Said, yes, go, she answered, and the girl went and got the baby's mother, which is also her mother, according to the story. Pharaoh's daughter said to her, take this baby and nurse him for me, and I will pay you. So the woman took the baby and nursed him. When the child grew older, she took him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. We don't know how long that was. So the Pharaoh's daughter apparently not even with the baby right now. She makes sure it's taken care of so it doesn't get killed, I guess. But so when the child grew older, we don't know how old. We don't know if that meant when he quit nursing or when he was 8 or 9 years old.
I think I've heard somewhere that it was when it was a teenager.
It's hard to know. It doesn't really tell us, does it? It says when the child grew older.
Tough time to get him when he's a teenager.
Yeah.
Missed all the good years and get him.
When you're 3 months old, when you're 3, you're older, and when you're 13, you're older.
Yeah,
So we don't really know, do we?
it's not a definitive.
No, we don't really know. It's just when he grew older. And she named him Moses, saying, I drew him out of the water. So that you can break that word down in the Egyptian language. It says, one day after Moses had grown up, see, things are moving fast, aren't they? We just had a baby in the river just merely several paragraphs ago. Now we got, when he grew up, he went out to where his own people were and watched them at their hard labor. Now, the important thing is Moses is not doing hard labor. He's growing up with Pharaoh, his family. He saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew who he recognized as one of his own people. Now, somehow we're not told how he learned that he was not Egyptian and he was Hebrew. Maybe he could tell by looking at himself. Or maybe somebody told him that. Maybe his mother told him how he was saved. So, in fact, we don't know when his own natural mother took him over there. He could have been 8 or 9 years old. He may know this. We don't know any of that right now. But anyway, he recognizes that this is an Egyptian beating a Hebrew. And if you look at the word for beat and kill in Hebrew here, if you're reading it, beat and kill in this story are basically the same word. So the key thing here is this Egyptian is probably beating this Hebrew to the point of death. So he's going to kill him. And that probably, with slaves, that probably happened probably with some regularity. If they weren't doing what they were told or working hard enough. So glancing this way and that and seeing no one, he killed the Egyptian. Again, that killed word is the same word for the beating. The Egyptian, and hid him in the sand. The next day he went out and saw 2 Hebrews fighting. He asked the one in the wrong, why are you hitting your fellow Hebrew? And then this Hebrew said to Moses, a Hebrew, who made you ruler and judge over us? Are you thinking of killing me as you killed the Egyptian? So, words gotten around, hadn't it? That's the point of the story here. Then Moses was afraid and thought, what I did must have become known. When Pharaoh heard of this, he tried to kill Moses. And we're not told any details about that other than he heard it and he tried to kill him. But Moses fled from the Pharaoh and went to live in Midian. Now, does anybody know where Midian is? It's a long way off. Now, the interesting thing about it, remember, Moses later leads all the people out of Egypt. He'd already done it himself, according to the story. Midian is, if you look on the map, well, let's see. I'll just draw real quick. If you got over here, here's Egypt, okay? There's the Sinai Peninsula. Midian's over here. This is like modern day Saudi Arabia. That's no short trip, is it? To go from here through here. Remember how they wandered around? We sometimes think they did a bunch of, I'm exaggerating. But he went over to here. So that's kind of like Johnny. You remember Johnny Carson? You said we come to Fort
Not what you call a straight shot, is it?
But anyway, so Moses, it takes some time to get from here over to here. This is not exactly friendly terrain, easy terrain to negotiate when you don't have an automobile or a Jeep. So, so he had to do it by foot or by camel if they managed to get a camel. And we don't even know how he escaped. How do you escape from living in the Pharaoh's palace and you get out? But he did. He says he fled from Pharaoh, went to live in Midian, where he sat down by a well. This is a W-E-L-L. He didn't sit down by this kind of well. If you're reading it, I just realize it's kind of tricky. He sat down by a well. Now the priest of Midian had 7 daughters. There's a perfect number of daughters, right? Had 7 daughters, and they came to draw water and fill the troughs to water with their father's flock, to water their father's flock. Some shepherds came along, some mean old shepherds came along and drove them away. But Moses got up and came to their rescue and watered their flock. What did he do to those shepherds? Why would those shepherds leave? Because one man said, y'all got to leave. Moses already killed one Egyptian, right? He was able to beat him. Moses must have been pretty strong. So that you gotta realize that story. That's not easy to do, to tell these shepherds who are trying to get some water. Look, guys, you gotta leave these women eat this. Because they didn't care if the women needed it or not. They were going to use the water first. But anyway, Moses took care of it. When the girls returned to Ruel, their father, what's his other name?
Jethro.
Jethro, yeah. He's got several names in the Bible. He asked them, why have you returned so early today? They answered, an Egyptian rescued us from the shepherds. He even drew water for us and watered the flock. And where is he? He asked his daughters. Why did you leave him? Invite him to have something to eat. Moses agreed to stay with him. Now, I don't know where Moses was waiting for this invitation. Again, they don't tell us all these details. If you were going to make a movie out of this, you got to fill in a lot of gaps. So,
That's been doing
I was just
filling a lot of
thinking,
gaps.
ask Charlton, yes,
Yeah.
he knows all that.
Anyway, so Moses agreed to stay with the man who gave his daughter Zipporah to Moses in marriage. That happened fairly quickly, didn't it? Now, we don't know that it happened that quick. He was there for a while, and he got to marry this man's daughter. Zipporah gave birth to a son, and Moses named him Gershom, saying, I have become an alien in a foreign land. Yeah, well, that's what that name means. So Moses had a son by his wife Zipporah. During that long period, the king of Egypt died. Now, that he was away. Some people say that Moses was away. This is my favorite number to use, 40 years. Suffice it to say he was away for a while, because he was there long enough to get married, have a kid, and this particular Pharaoh died. So during that long period, the king of Egypt died. Now, the reason they may not include these dates in here, why would you think they might not put the dates in here?
They didn't know.
Exactly. They didn't know what the dates were. They're recounting a story based on, some of us would call it legends, but on stories, oral tradition that they've heard about Moses over the years. So Moses was a great leader, so there would be a lot of stories about Moses. During that long period, the king of Egypt died. The Israelites groaned in their slavery and cried out. And their cry for help because of their slavery went up to God. Now, and this is an interesting part of the story too. They've been slaves for hundreds of years there. Have they not been crying before that? You think they would, right? I mean, just knowing how humans are when they're suffering, they tend to cry. When people suffer now, when people are dying or loved ones dying, what do people tend to do? Cry. They tend to pray, call for a priest. And they cry out for help from God. It's things that humans do. When we can't take care of it ourselves, we call on a higher power to help us out. You know, look, I can't pull this one off, God, you got to help me. And that's what they were doing. But my bet is they've been doing it. Again, they're retelling the story. The Israelites groaned in their slavery and cried out, and they cried for help because their slavery went up to God. God heard their groaning, and that's God hearing, and he remembered. It's almost as if they had to remind him in this story, right? He remembered his covenant with Abraham, with Isaac and Jacob. So God looked on the Israelites, and he was concerned about them. So most of these stories are kind of puzzling to me. It's maybe they're supposed to be. So you have to look in the book of Exodus. It's going to be God's action through a human to save a nation that he had a promise with. So one of the lessons we need to learn is God works through people. I mean, you got people who do evil things. Evil works through people. God works through people, whether in our time, that time. God's working through people today, if they will listen to him and agree to do what he wants them to do. And I would argue that we, as Christians, we all have a role to play to help out. So these things are still going on. Still people oppressed in the year 2022. There's still people oppressed in the world, in the United States, and in McDonough, Georgia. So there's still people oppressed. Sometimes it can be oppressed because of family situation. A lot of people have put themselves in positions to be oppressed. A lot of people are oppressed by their own addiction. But a lot of people are oppressed and depressed. And one of the things that can lead to depression is oppression. Life's oppressing you, so you get depressed. People are oppressing you, so you get depressed. But you see, God looked at the Israelites. They've been suffering for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. And he said God looked on them and he was concerned about them. So now he's going to go in this story and appear to Moses. So we have the stories trying to get us to, how did Moses come to do what he did? How did he get to this point? How did God choose him? How did Moses succeed in doing what he did? So, and if you look at in the Old Testament, probably to me, Joseph and Moses are the most two powerful, good characters. David was a powerful king, and he was faithful to God. He did some good things, bad things. I still think Joseph was a very good man. Moses was a great leader. And then for Christians, all of this leads up to God sending Jesus to go because he saw the plight of people on earth. And now we're supposed to look at Jesus to see how we should treat each other. But we don't do that as much as we should. So, all right. Any questions? Any comments? Any applications?
Lots of applications.
There is. There's a lot of opportunity for us. I'm hoping and praying. One of my prayers for today and in the world in which I live is that God will send us a leader to help unify our nation. Our most recent struggles have been people dividing us and each side just denigrating each other. We need somebody who will come back and say, we're going to behave better than that. We're going to be better. We're going to work together. We're going to be kind to one another. That's what Jesus said. Of course, he killed him. Some reason people love people like Pharaoh. People in Germany loved Hitler. They did. I'm sure the Jewish people did. People loved Hitler. He had power. He had power. People love that kind of power. His power is in his meekness, in his kindness. Power of God on earth. So God's power is mostly foreign to most of us, most of the people that live. We're all looking for powerful figures. For this, we need to look at the power of the cross. And that gets lost a lot of times in our politics. And thus, I'm concerned if we don't, if America doesn't at least, I know America's got a lot of faith in this country. That's a complicated issue. But God sent that, though. You know, a lot of faiths look to God or a God. We can all unify what Jesus taught. What's wrong with being good to everybody? We can. Did you have comments?
I didn't have.
Oh, you just pointed, that's a,
I'm nodding my head
That's-
back here.
okay. All right, well, I know it's getting late, y'all got to go, let's close with prayer. Dear God, thank you for this powerful lesson about one of the most powerful characters that ever lived and served. And basically seeing the needs of his people, walked away from being a life of being a Pharaoh and loyalty and became your servant to lead people to their own salvation. And
Thank you, dear. That was interesting.
next week we'll be in Deuteronomy.
Good.